Hello students, welcome back to my class. So in this video, I'm going to start a new chapter which is called as the cell. Cell structure and its function. Now, to begin with the chapter, you must know what is a cell. As you know, or as you have some idea that all the living organisms, they are made up of cell. No life can exist without a cell. Therefore, cell is the basic unit of life that does different functions in this whole living world. We can see many organisms near us. Some organisms that we cannot even see with our naked eye, but they exist in or around us. Those organisms, they are also made up of cells. So on the basis of the number of cells, living organisms, therefore, it is of two types. One is unicellular organisms and the another one is multicellular organisms. And we, or the higher plants or the higher animals, they belongs to the complex multicellular forms of life. So in this chapter, we're just going to learn about the basic structures and the functions of a cell with the different components of the cell. So to begin with, let's start with what is a cell. The cell, it is the fundamental structure and functional unit of life. A cell that always bears a structure and that always does a function. As you have come across many chapters till now in the syllabus, and there you have all learned about the different living organisms. And in that, you have known that the plants, they does some different functions. Animal, they does some different functions. Plant cells, they are different. Animal cells, they are different. So in the chapter now, we are going to learn more elaborately about the different components that is present within a cell and how do they function. So as for the definition, the cell, that is the structural and functional unit of life. Now, this cell, it was discovered by an English scientist and his name was Robert Hooke, when he was trying to experiment with his newly invented microscope. And he noted down all his experience while dealing with the microscope in his book, which is called as Micrographia, and that was published in London in the year 1665. So when he was observing some objects under the microscope, he took some corks. Now, water corks, either dried tissue parts of a plant body. So when he was observing those corks under his microscope, so there he could see some compartments which were bounded by a wall. And every possible object that he took, or every possible cork that he took, so there he observed the same type of structures which were all bounded with some walls, and they look like that of a compartment or rooms. So from that, he termed the word cellular for the presently used word which is called as the cell. And from that word, it is said that from that word cellular, which means compartment, the word cell has arrived and it is being used worldwide. So in that way, Robert Hooke, he became the first person to discover the cell. And later on, many scientists, they have done different works on the structure of a cell, on the different functions or the different components that is present within a cell. And in that way came the branch of biology which is called as cytology. And when this branch of biology, it came into existence, which is called as cytology, there the classification pattern, the way people they used to, or the taxonomists they used to classify the living organisms before discovering a cell, which was done only on the basis of the morphology and the anatomical features. Now that whole concept it changed, and the branch by cytology that had helped the scientists to know about the different types of organisms. So this is a very short introduction for a cell. After the discovery of the cell, many scientists they studied about this particular structure which is called as the cell, which is bounded by all the sides. And they also came across some structures which were the components that are present inside a cell. Now, the basic characteristics which is called as the cell theory, it was proposed by two scientists, and they were M.J. Sladen and Theodore Swan. They studied the living cell, and in the year 1839 they presented their paper which is named as Microscopic Investigations on Similarities and Growth in Plants and Animal Cells near the Science Society. And in that they stated a hypothesis which we study now as cell theory that gives the characteristics of a cell. So let's discuss that what is the cell theory. Cell theory, it comprises of four statements that Sladen and Swan they finally concluded after their study with a living cell. And those four statements together, they are called as the cell theory, which were proposed by Sladen and Swan in the year 1839. That is the year when they presented their paper. Now, what are those four statements? The first statement is that cell is the basic, fundamental unit of life that has a structure and a function. So as I have said, that cell, it is the living entity for any kind of living organism. Either it is for us or it is for a microscopic organism like that of bacteria, mycoplasma, yeast, etc., which we cannot even see with our naked eye. So a single cell can also perform the same essential duties that is required for a life to exist as the one that is being performed in case of a multicellular body like us. So that is the first statement or the first characteristic of a cell, that it is the smallest unit of life and it is the basic structure or the fundamental structure that has a structure and a function. Now let's come to the second statement. The second statement, it says that a cell is comprised of a protoplasm. That means the cell which is bounded by a wall. Within that wall, there are the living components where all this functioning takes place. And that living component inside the cell, that is called as the protoplasm, which is actually the living part of a cell. And this protoplasm, it consists of two parts. One is the nucleus and the other that is called as the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm, they are again compartmentalized to form cell organelles such as mitochondria, Golgi body, ribosomes, etc. that we are going to discuss eventually in this chapter. That means a cell, it comprises of two parts. The outer boundary, which is the non-living part, and the inner part, which is called as the protoplasm. So the statement goes that a cell comprises of protoplasm, which is the living component of a cell, and that helps in functioning of a cell with the help of the nucleus, which is a part of the protoplasm, and the cytoplasm along with its cell organelles such as mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, etc. Now let's come to the third statement proposed by Sladen and Swan, and that is that the cells, they are all alike in their structure and function. So the statement, it is quite simple, as I have said earlier also, that for a bacteria, as the cell will perform, for us also the cell will perform in the similar way. So all cells, they are alike, but the difference lies in its functions. Otherwise, all the cells, they have the basic structure that is same. And the fourth statement, that is that the functions of a cell are the sum total of all the activities and interactions that takes place inside a cell. Now what does this statement, it means? This function that a cell will do, that will depend on the sum total of all the activities that will take place inside the cell. That means it will take place inside the protoplasm. Now what does this protoplasm, it comprises of? Protoplasm that is made up of a structure which is called as the nucleus and the other components such as the cytoplasm, which bears the cell organelles or the different compartments such as mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, say for example the plastids in case of plant cell. Animal cells, they do not have plastid, etc. And that will give a function to a particular cell. And in that way, we find different kind of functions in our nature. In case of our body, as you know that our body, it also comprises of different types of cells or different types of tissues. Those different types of tissues, they are formed from different types of cells. Why? Because the internal part or the protoplasm, they perform some different interactions which gives a different outcome, and that outcome is only called as the function of a cell. And that is why the statement, it is said that the sum total of all the activities, the function of a cell, that is the sum total of all the activities that takes place inside the cell, that means inside the protoplasm, and the interactions that takes place within these parts within the cell. So these are the four statements. So let me repeat the statements again. That the first statement, it was that cell, it is the basic unit of life, or it is the fundamental unit of life that has a structure and a function. The second statement, it was that cell, it is made up, or it comprises of a protoplasm, which is the living part of the cell or living component of the cell, and this protoplasm, it bears nucleus and cytoplasm. Cytoplasm, it bears the cell organelles such as mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, ribosomes, etc. The third statement, it was that all cells are all alike in their structure. And the fourth statement is that the function of a cell is the sum total of all the activities that takes place inside the cell. Now, after this theory, which was proposed by Sladen and Swan, as science progressed or as technologies progressed, many other statements or many other characteristics of a cell that came into existence. Now, together, all this is called as the modern cell theory or cell principles. So let's know more about such characteristics of a cell. But the basic characters, it was given by Sladen and Swan, and those basic characters, that means the four statements that I have discussed just now, these are called as the cell theory. Now many scientists, they came to know some other facts about a cell. As for example, Rudolf Virchow in 1855, he stated that a cell always arises from a pre-existing cell. Then in 1866, Ernst Haeckel, he stated that a cell, it stores the genetic material which is called as the DNA, and that transmits character from one generation into the other. So such other facts about a cell, it was proposed during this course of time, just after the hypothesis of Swan and Sladen. So in that way, our modern concept of the cell, which is, we can say, that is the modification of the cell theory that came into existence from different scientific workers or different scientists. And some characteristics or the features from the cell principles that will help you all to know more about the cell are that the cell, that is the smallest unit of life, or it is the part where life exists. Then it has a structure and a function, as it was proposed by Sladen and Swan. Then the third, it is said that the cell, it consists of protoplasm, which is the living component of a cell. Then fourth comes that the function of a cell is the interaction of the different components inside a cell. Then the fifth one, that is that a cell, it always arises from a pre-existing form of cell or pre-existing cell. Then the sixth, that is that a cell, it can perform all the vital activities of life. Seventh, that a cell, it always shows its totipotent nature. That means that it can regenerate itself into a cell again. Then comes that a cell, it stores the genetic material. Cell, apart from the functions that it does for a living body, it is also responsible for purpose of reproduction, that we call it as the gametes, for heredity, for diseases. Then there are several such features, that is that cell, they can transmit characters from one generation into the other, or life, it is transmitted from one form into the other just by the modifications inside the cell. A cell, it can undergo mutations. Cell, it can repair or heal itself. So all such types of theories or features, or we can say the facts, that came into existence, and all those features, they were put inside a new theory which is called as the cell principle or cell doctrine, or that we call as the modern cell theory. So these are some characteristics that is present in a cell. So in this video, these basic characters of a cell that are being discussed, and in the next class we are going to learn about the structure and the components of a cell. Thank you.